Welcome to Chicago Counterpoint Television. I'm your host, Attorney Jeffrey Leving. This program is brought to you by the Fatherhood Educational Institute, and I would like to welcome our listening audience to our studio, and I'd like to thank you for welcoming us into your home. If anybody wants any information on the Fatherhood Educational Institute, here's a little snapshot of the website right there. It's a great organization, fatherhood-edu.org, fantastic organization, and it has a great Twitter at fatherhood.edu. At fatherhood.edu is its Twitter. So Eliot Zinger is our host, and it's great to have him here. And actually, there was a news article that was distributed, and it was published, and this is all about our guest, Eliot Zinger, and the show, and it talks about a lot of his legal work, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that today, especially the work he does fighting for civil rights and justice, fighting against race-based discrimination, and everything else he does to try and make this city a more livable and better city. And Attorney Zinger, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Great to have you here. We already have a caller calling who wants to talk to you.
That was quick.
Caller, you're on the air with attorneys Jeffrey Leving and Eliot Zinger. What can Attorney Zinger do for you tonight?
Yes, thanks for taking my call, and I was looking forward to your guest because I have a question. My sister has a baby that at 1 year old, they diagnosed with a Wilms tumor, and she thinks that maybe the tumor was growing, but the doctors said that it was something that they weren't able to diagnose any earlier, and now she's in chemotherapy. And I'm wondering, do you think she has a case, or should she talk to a lawyer about that?
Yeah, Eliot Zinger is here to respond to your question. But my answer is obviously a lawyer basically should be consulted. Now, this show is brought to you by the Fatherhood Educational Institute. It's a non-for-profit, so this is purely educational, but I think obviously this person should talk to a lawyer. This is a non-commercial show, but feel free to answer this question, attorney.
Yeah, so in all cases involving alleged medical malpractice, all of the medical records and the facts have to be reviewed by an expert who is an expert in that particular field. So, for example, if it's an OB/GYN situation, you would have to get an expert OB/GYN doctor to review the medical records and give a written opinion as to whether he believes that doctor violated the standard of care in the community. If he believes that, then that's the first step in having a case. But you need that in order to file a case. So, yeah, it's good to go to a lawyer, and the lawyer would have to contact a representative who would be the appropriate doctor.
Yeah, these are very complicated cases. They have to be handled correctly. You could always contact the Fatherhood Educational Institute at 312-795-9060. Jennifer, the overhead wasn't set up right. You know what I'm talking about. It has to be set up right, so I don't think we can use it now. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to use our overhead now, so what I'll do is I'll show you what you would be seeing if the overhead was working. This is the Fatherhood Educational Institute's graphic. Next week, hopefully the overhead camera will be operational. But welcome to the show, caller. This is Attorney Jeffrey Leving, and I have Eliot Zinger here, a fantastic lawyer, and it's an honor to have him volunteering his time for free to provide free educational information to Chicago Counterpoint TV's listening audience tonight. What can we do for you?
Mr. Zinger, I know that you advocated for many of the victims of the Burgee torture, and I want to commend you for taking that on. Could you just explain what kind of torture these poor people had to go through and what sort of compensation they were able to get?
Well, first of all, each case is different. Unfortunately, what they all have in common is that there was many years ago, most of the cases that I've been involved in 20, 25 years ago, during what's now commonly known as the John Burge era, where the infamous John Burge ran a reign of terror and tortured many, many African American citizens in the city of Chicago. I can't tell you about every single case, obviously, but quite a few people have been exonerated. We're working on several cases now. We just had one in September. Mark Maxson, who was exonerated, he then filed, and we're pursuing very aggressively a civil rights case in the federal district court, where it's now pending, and we'll be getting ready for trial and are getting ready for trial at the present time. I'm currently representing 4 other victims of the Burge era, and there have been many lawsuits and many exonerations, which you probably read about in the newspaper, unfortunately, every week or every 2 weeks now, it seems. So, you can get that information that you're seeking. There's a ton of it online, and if you're really interested in that particular era, which is fascinating, you can get it online. And some of the issues that I'm deeply concerned about is, number one, how it gets to be that people give what's known as a false confession, especially if it's not the type of full torture that some of these cases were involved in. And we've actually discussed this in Mr. Maxson's case with an expert, a world-renowned expert in the area of wrongful convictions and false confessions. And it's really a fascinating topic, which has just come to light in the last decade or so. How would a person who is innocent confess to something he didn't do?
The Mark Maxson case was horrific. This man spent 24 years in the penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit. And thank God, and thanks to Eliot Zinger, Mark is now out of prison. But these things are really, really terrible. And if you want more information, you could always call the Fatherhood Educational Institute, 312-795-9060, 312-795-9060. Next caller, you're on the air, Chicago Counterpoint TV. I'm the host, Attorney Jeff Leving, and we have Elliot Zinger here tonight.
Yes, how you doing, Jeff? How you doing, Elliot? My name is Wallace Gator Brownlee. I'm one of the urban translators that works along with Elliot Zinger and other attorneys in these wrongful conviction cases. I heard you make mention about Mark Maxson's case. One of the things that gets me is, how can the city of Chicago waste taxpayer money to hire private law firms at exorbitant rates to defend a case that they know that they can't win? And what I mean by that, the reason Mark Maxson is free is not just because of the wonderful legal team that he has put together, but the fact that the evidence, DNA evidence, that Mark had already proved by the state that his DNA wasn't on the victim or any of the evidence that they found. And they end up finding an individual who 2 years later, after Mark had got locked up, this individual ended up killing his uncle. And that's how, when Elliot and Larry Dreyfus, the other attorney, was able to convince the state's attorney to check out the DNA on the on the evidence, they end up getting a hit, and that's how they was able to catch this guy and charge him with the murder. And it's my understanding, from what I read in the papers, that this individual gave a video confession to the FBI and the state's attorney, and he also wrote a letter to Mark Maxson and to the victim's family, saying that he was sorry for what he had done.
Well, you're actually very accurate. Thank you for your comment. That's pretty much exactly what happened in the case. After we were able to get DNA, we did identify the person who has since confessed to the killing, horrible killing of a quarter of a century ago of a young child. And the interesting thing, and this refers back to what I was talking about earlier, is that even in his original so-called confession, he said that he was trying to clear himself by giving blood samples. Said he was trying to clear himself by giving hair samples. And actually, the state's witnesses testified at the trial 25 years ago that the hair sample and the blood sample that he gave did not match what was found on the young boy. And he was convicted anyway based on this, and I'll call it again, a so-called confession with no other evidence. He was trying to help the police originally because he had seen the child. As to the financial issues in the city, and they have to make their own decisions about what they want to do with the case. I don't work for the city. I'm not the mayor. We have a fight to fight, and we're going to fight it. And whatever they decide to do, that's up to them. But that they'll have to make that choice.
Thank you for calling in. This is pretty significant because you look at this. Here's a man that's trying to do good and help the police. Then he ends up convicted of a crime he didn't commit. Taxpayer dollars went into convicting him and putting him in prison for 24 years for a crime he didn't commit. It's bizarre.
And not only a crime,
bizarre.
Jeff, can you imagine the murder and sexual assault of a 6-year-old African-American boy? And a 30-year-old man is charged with this, sitting in the penitentiary for 25 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. This man, Mark Maxson, as I look at it, is a victim. He was a target looking for an arrow, and it's terrible. And it's terrible. Things like this shouldn't happen in the city of Chicago. It shouldn't happen anywhere in our country. So it's something that I'm glad finally has somewhat come to an end, and Mark Maxson has his freedom, and he's no longer locked up like an animal for a crime he didn't commit. Very, very important. Now, I know that you also have helped a lot of brain injury clients. You've been involved in brain injury litigation, and I know that's part of what you do. And I'm wondering, why do you get involved in brain injury litigation? Because not many lawyers have any interest in this highly complicated practice area. So I wonder what motivates you to practice in the area of brain injury litigation, and what do you look for in these types of cases?
Well, I got involved in it almost 30 years ago with a client who was in Stateway Gardens. It was a 13-month-old.
I hate to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but Jennifer, could you have somebody please bring the emails and the questions from callers that I couldn't answer last time that's not here? Could you have somebody bring it into the studio? Sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
Apologize. There's just been some issues in the pre-production aspect of this.
I got you.
But go ahead, please.
So in any case, I represented a young girl. She was a baby at the time, 13 months old, and a screwdriver went through her head in the project at Stateway Garden. And we had a lawsuit involving that. And from that case and several other cases, I just started getting involved in that area and found it really, really fascinating. And, those are not like multiple, high demand cases. You don't do 100 of them at the time, like, accidents or something like that. But I've always, every year or two, taken on one project. And thus far, they've all been successful. I represented a young man by the name of Demetrius Williams this year. His case just settled. He was run over by a truck, and luckily he lived through the trauma, but he did suffer a traumatic brain injury. And, I just found it a fascinating area because of the neuropsychological aspects of it, the neurological aspects, the rehabilitation aspects. So, it's a funny thing, but once you start getting into a certain area, and this really is a niche area and specialty,
Hold on. Could you please hand me the papers, please? And it should be in a file. Thank you.
you just
Appreciate it.
grow to like it. You get to know the people who are involved in it. You get to know the type of treatment they need, and you really help people. In fact, I owe this young man a call. He called me yesterday, but he called me. His case is over. We settled the case, but he called me. I can't wait to hear from you. And this is a lifelong client and friendship now. So it's really exciting to see him develop and that's the part of the joy of being a lawyer, is to get a good result and, maintain a relationship with the client.
Oh, that's fantastic. Caller, you're on the air, Chicago Counterpoint Television, Attorney Jeff Loving and Eliot Zinger. What can we do for you this evening?
Yes, I'm a father, and I'm also concerned about false charges of domestic violence. Now, they're not as severe as false murder charges, but they do have a devastating effect on a father being removed from his household and his children. And false allegations of domestic violence often amount to he said, she said in court. I was wondering what your take and aspect of defense on that is, sir.
Well, this is a significant issue, and there are cases involving what you brought up that have actually led to murder charges. I mean, this is a very, very, very important and significant topic you brought up. And if you want any more information on this, you could always take a look at the Fatherhood Educational Institute's website, which is fatherhood-edu.org. But what you're bringing up is very, very important. It's very critical. And we have a lot of problems in our country. Right now, 24 million children live absent their biological father, and there's orders of protection entered based on false allegations as well as truthful ones, high conflict parental alienation cases, visitation, interference, and now it's called parenting time interference because the laws have all changed this year. And these issues sometimes become so serious that major felonies end up sometimes being committed or falsely charged. So these are real major issues that you're bringing up. So if you could call the Fatherhood Educational Institute, look at the website, fatherhood-edu.org. There's a father who was convicted of murder, who was reunited with his little girl after he ended up being released from prison. And you can see the video on the Fatherhood Educational Institute's website. And here's a little blurb of the website. And if you get on there, you could watch this video of a dad spent time in prison for a murder conviction. Upon his release, reunited with his daughter. So these family issues can become quite horrific, and they're affecting the future of our society. Thank you for calling. Next caller, you're on the air. I'm Attorney Jeffrey Loving. Very fortunate to have Elliot Singer here. What can he do for you this evening?
Well, Mr. Zinger, I was wondering, I know you represent civil rights cases, and you must come in contact a lot with and think about the violence in Chicago. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on ways to minimize or, eliminate the terrible violence in Chicago.
Well, I wish I had a great answer for that one. It seems like that one, it's really hard to say. I think I would think that programs in the community and community involvement would be the key.
And don't forget the Fatherhood Educational Institute, because I'm hoping Elliot will come back to another meeting and volunteer his time for free, because the most reliable predictor of crime in Chicago and in our nation is father absence.
Right.
That's the key, but go ahead.
Right, and I think a large part of it is education. If you're giving someone a chance to do something productive, educating them and getting them a job, you don't have time for goofing around in gangs and selling drugs in the street. But there has to be some motivation. There has to be some opportunity. So I think the communities have to be involved in creating something productive. And also education is very important. I've seen and I've worked with a lot of gang members because I'm heavily involved in the criminal defense area over the last 37 years. So I've worked with a lot of gang members who actually have turned their lives around. But it took something. It took someone taking a chance on them. It took someone and introducing them to a program or an educational program where they could flourish and see something, see an opening, see something about themselves, see the potential that they had. and I think that's the real key. That's almost when I started my career as a public defender 37 years ago, the judge that I worked with, Judge Kowalski, took me to the county jail. I think you were there with us, Jeff, at that time. And there was a program that he instituted in the county jail behind the doors in the school where people could really take a look at their lives outside of all the tension of the jail and be with the judge and be with the lawyer. And we had guests that came in. Fascinating how motivated some people are and how smart some people are and capable some people are that are sitting behind the jail. It's really, really a shame. So I think really powerful programs and community development probably is the answer, because the policing hasn't worked alone. I mean, we need the police, we support the police, but alone it's not going to make a difference. You have to have some change internally and some transformation internally.
I interviewed President Obama some time ago on an old radio show of mine that I hosted, and this is exactly what we talked about. And my opinion is we don't need more police on the streets to arrest our children. We need more fathers involved in the community, in their lives, because children are more likely to engage in crime as well as become victims of sexual and physical abuse if their dads aren't there. And if their fathers aren't there, they often gravitate toward gangs, because gang leaders are strong paternal figures to fatherless children. And I put on a big event with Father Flager at St. Sabina, and that was a real key focus of what we were doing at St. Sabina. We have to re-engage fathers in the lives of their children, because a boy can't be what he can't see. And a lot of these little boys end up defining their own manhood based on what they see on TV, and TV often glorifies violence and drug dealing and having recreational sex with multiple sex partners, and that's what they see on TV. That's what drives the ratings up. So this is pretty significant, and this is something the Fatherhood Educational Institute is very concerned about. And I know we have to get another caller on the air. Caller, Chicago Counterpoint TV. I'm your host, Attorney Jeffrey Loving. Very fortunate to have Attorney Eliot Zinger, Elliot R. Zinger, here tonight to answer your questions.
Yeah, hi. I appreciate both you taking my call, and I have more of a practical question. In a situation where, say, a dad has a couple of kids and he's living with a wife or a girlfriend or whatever, and the wife they're having difficulties and she's threatening to call the police and make up false charges that he hit or something like that. I mean, how do you get out of a situation like that if you got kids you don't want to move away from, and what are the downsides? I mean, I know it's more of a practical question, but how would you answer that?
Well, that's a tough question, Elliot. And I often talk to fathers that are victims of abuse. Their children are victims, and they want to get out of the home so bad. Some of them leave to escape the nightmare they're living in, but they should never leave their children there. They should get into court, and if their children are being victimized, if they're all victims of domestic violence, that dad should get an order of protection and get exclusive possession and protect the children. I know it's easy to walk out and it's tough, but if a dad walks out of the home and you leave your children in an abusive environment all alone with a person who may be suffering from a serious psychological disorder, what can happen to those children? They could end up targets looking for an arrow. It's terrible. I know it's easier for me to say than for somebody to do, but this is something that's really important. Do you have any other questions, caller? Okay, the caller's off the air. Next caller, you're on Chicago Counterpoint. I'm your host, Attorney Loving. We have Elliot Zinger here. What can he do for you this evening?
Well, thank you, Mr. Leving. I'd like to ask Mr. Zinger. There's so many people I've talked to that have been arrested, talked to the police, and then had to plead guilty or plea bargain when they were really innocent because they implicated themselves when they talked to the police. And they're very intimidating. I'd like to ask Mr. Zinger what he would recommend if you're ever questioned by the police. What are general rules to protect yourself?
as they say on The Sopranos, talk to my lawyer. Some things on TV are true. When you watch these gangster shows, they say, talk to my lawyer. Never give a statement to the police without your lawyer sanctioning it, without your lawyer present, without requesting a lawyer. Once you request a lawyer, the police are required to stop the questioning, or the state's attorney, if the state's attorney is present at the police station, is required to stop the questioning per Miranda. So ask for a lawyer. You want to plead your innocence, even if you're trying to get your story out. Even if they tell you, well, if you tell us, we'll give you a break, or 20 other things. Never talk to the police without talking to your lawyer, because that's how you get in trouble. That's your constitutional right. If you get arrested, it's not the time to be a nice guy and try to work things out by yourselves. That's why they have criminal defense lawyers. And over the last 35 years, more people have gotten in trouble for just opening up their big mouths and talking and thinking it was going to help them. And I can't blame all of these people, because for some reason the police can be very persuasive. But you got to stand your ground. That's why they have lawyers. Talk to your lawyer. Keep a card of your lawyer in your wallet. If someone asks you a question who is under authority, either police or state's attorney, you give them the card. You say, I have a lawyer. I would like to speak with my lawyer. It's as simple as that. You see it on TV. Not everything you see on TV you can believe, but you can definitely believe that one.
I hope that helps, caller, because that educational input is absolutely correct. We have 1 minute left and the show's over. So what I would like to do is thank my good friend and guest, Attorney Zinger.
Long time, Jeff.
Yes, we've been practicing law for a very long time. Very
almost
long
80
time.
years between.
Exactly. It's a long, long time. And we're trying to give back to the community. We're giving back to the community. And what we're trying to do is make this world a better place. And it's important, because there's a lot of change that's needed, a lot of important change. And the Fatherhood Educational Institute, I think, is contributing to that type of change. And I'd like to thank everybody for watching the show. And I'd like them to join us next week. And I'll see everybody same time, same place, next week. God bless.